Hello, hello, hello. If I ever have a revelation, if I ever have a new idea, I thought it'd be a good idea to record them. Just kind of jot them down in video form content, a type of digital journal. And this topic is considering politics. How do we win the political battle, right? What do we do? And what I'm seeing a lot of, and is very depressing, is a lot of people fall for a lot of propaganda saying that this war in Iran is good, that this war in Iran going on right now is a success, that we should be doing this and it's going to be a great success and it's going to, be a huge military success. We're going to stop Iran from getting nukes and bring peace to the Middle East, blah, 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 all this dumb shit, right? Um, and I'm just like, how do people keep falling for it? How is it that everybody keeps falling for the same mistakes over and over? How is something like the Trump administration able to be perverted and co-opted into something that steers people back onto the plantation? How'd that happen? Right? And how do we get out of this? What's going to be the end game? What's the stable solution? How do we make it so that whatever revolution that gets installed isn't co-opted to create more evil, right? And I kind of had a revelation recently that the only way we're going to be able to combat the various perversions and political problems in our society is with virtue. And the only way to actually attain meaningful virtue, true virtue, not just self improvement, right, is through the church. The church is the only means that we have available to purify the individual, right? Which is, if you really look at it, the Orthodox Church is the only institution still remaining that holds its sword and forces combat, intense combat against degeneracy and sin. And a lot of that is a process to purify the soul, right? And so it's the fasting, it's the reading, it's the repentance, it's the daily prayer, it's everything, right? It's also the intellectuals, right? There's intellectual components, but a unique component of Orthodoxy is, and why I think it's superior to Roman Catholicism in many ways. But one way is that the intellectuals of the Orthodox Church are combined and tooled with virtue, and the virtue is cultivated through intense ascetic practices that I would say a lot of religions nowadays lack. So you have Roman Catholicism, which has a lot of the intellectuals, the scholasticism, but it doesn't practice the virtue anymore. And so what happens is you have a lot of egotism, perverse, over intellectualized, over rationalized ideas that are divorced from the individual and divorced from praxis. And so you have this kind of very egotistical system that thinks it's superior to, say, Protestants because it has all these intellectual qualities to it, but it's not weaponized or harnessed in the correct way because the church is not cultivating virtue and purifying the individual on an individual level. And one reason they don't even really do this is because of their theology, right? They don't believe in theosis. They don't believe in divinization, right? As a thing you can do. They don't believe in the essence energy distinction or the ability for individuals to deify themselves, right, here on Earth. So they tend to push everything towards the future and purgatory, right? Purgatory or heaven, the beatific vision. They tend to move all of these divinization, deification faculties and processes to the afterlife, which is kind of problematic, right? Tends to lead to a lot of saints in the Roman Catholic system who want martyrdom because the system that they believe in pushes them to see this life as inert, I guess would be the word. There's nothing you can do in this life to deify, purify yourself. So you're just waiting to enter heaven. You're waiting to become a martyr. You're waiting to begin purgatory. These types of things. But it leaves a very vacuous, empty existence when you're here on earth. It tends to lead to nihilism. I think it's why the atheistic movement came out of Catholicism. I think because it carries that spirit of deadness in the Roman Catholic Church. Highly intellectual, highly sophisticated, but spiritually dead. But yes, but that is the key. That is the key to how we are going to fix the problem, is this very important, invisible, but very important process of individual purification. Because that's really where the battle of evil begins, is with the individual and with combating the vices within yourself, and doing so in a brutal way, doing so in a way that demands discipline, that's brutal, that's difficult, that's unforgiving in many ways, harsh, right? But that's exactly what you need. That's a sign that that's the real church. That's sincere. It's not just telling you, oh, just say a prayer and and read the Bible and everything will be okay. It's not soft shoeing it. It's saying, no, we have to do a battle with evil every day, and the way you do it is this intense. It's like a workout. It's like a spiritual workout, really. Fasting. You can't eat all these foods. You got to say the fucking Jesus prayer like a gazillion times. You're supposed to prostrate and venerate all the time, constantly making the sign of the cross correctly. Every time, the triune God is ever mentioned, you have to bless yourself. It's intense, and it can feel annoying if you're just not thinking that hard, but if you're thinking about it as active combat with evil and the purification needed to actually cleanse yourself from evil, then you can view it as a powerful technology, right? Spiritual technology. And I think that's the only way we're actually going to be able to solve the political problems, is for the individual to fix the evil within themselves, right? I think too much of the time we want to externalize a lot of the chaos and problems in the world, but the problem with that a lot of the time is it turns into things that we can't control, because you and I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars. We can't go influence politics on a large scale. We can't, even if it was grassroots and a bunch of people rose up, quote unquote, I don't think there's a lot we could do. I don't think we have this sophistication to actually purge the elite, purge the evil people who run our country, and actually reinstate something better. Because you got to think too, right? Like, it's not just enough to host a revolution. You would also have to install something that can't be corrupted, and install something that can't be perverted, right? And so the only way you're going to be able to do that is with individual virtue. How are you going to keep your king from being compromised? Well, reading history, a very common compromising technique is sexual compromise, blackmail, right? If it has to do with kids, it also, in the past, you used to be homosexual, right? So if you were caught doing homosexual acts, that was in the past, that was considered as scandalous as doing something with kids nowadays. So the same way that Epstein blackmails politicians with pedophile stuff, various kingdoms, Russia, spies would blackmail rulers and kings and senators, Roman senators, American politicians in the early 19th and 18th century, it's very common to use sexual blackmail. And so the only way to stop yourself from being compromised through sexual blackmail is to not engage in degenerate sexual acts, right? So that's a good example of how protecting a political system from perversion really relies on individual virtue, right? It relies on the individual being fortified in what they do and what they know. Another problem too is like if everybody's addicted to social media, if everybody is constantly looking to slop entertainment for their political opinions, or for looking to Instagram or some slop entertainer for their political takes, I think Nick Fuentes kind of falls in this category. A little bit. He can sometimes. A lot of what he says is more entertaining and bombastic than it is informative, but he's also very informative. But if you are too addicted or rely too heavily or in a mind state of consuming slop, if that's what you're used to, then whoever's able to produce the slop for you is going to be able to control the masses, right? So we have to cultivate a mindset that, a palate that is hungry for truth and not hungry for slop or entertainment, bombastics, right? Like if we just listen to whoever is the most edgy, then we're just going to be driven in circles, going nowhere, because the most edgy thing is just going to be whatever is the most countercultural, and whatever's countercultural is always going to oscillate, right? Suddenly it's edgy to be pro-Israel, right? If everybody's anti-Israel, suddenly the edgy thing is to be pro-Israel. So you might see in the future somebody who thinks they're funny. Maybe Nick has a funny take where it's like, actually, I'm pro-Israel. Because isn't that edgy? Isn't that funny? So if you constantly are addicted to kind of low-tier slop or being edgy, which there's nothing wrong in certain amounts, but if your mind state is this kind of nothing matters, I just want people to make me laugh, or I want things to be funny, then that can be a very damaging unproductive mindset too, right? So is it good that people are becoming aware of Israel and the problems going on with Israel? Yeah, but we also need to work on ourselves as individuals to fortify ourselves and our spirits against perversion ourselves, right? Because let's not forget, it's easy to call out the people who are in power, but they still have a lot of hands on various levers in society that they can utilize to hurt you or exercise leverage or regain control. They control a lot of your media, right? They control a lot of the food you eat, so they can poison you with the food. They can poison your mind with the entertainment, with the media, with movie character, with games, right? GTA 6 might have some pro-Israel propaganda in there somewhere that you're not even realizing, right? They might co-opt an edgy, funny orange man, right? Mr. Trump. They might co-opt someone you find charismatic and funny to become pro-Israel, and then you're going to be torn, right? So it's a problem because it's not just enough to have the right idea, right? This is Roman Catholicism. It's not just enough to have an intellectual assent or understanding of the problem. There also needs to be a practical component where the things that you know then trickle down to the rest of your life and trickle down to how you act and how you live your life. So like if you really want to be anti-Israel, you should get off the slop. You should get your money out of the banks, right? You should invest in something that isn't fiat currency. You should stop watching slop entertainment. You should stop watching Netflix. Try to eat healthy. And there's also going to be the faith and the spiritual component of it too, right? Try to protect your soul, protect your spirit. And so one of the big framings for me is that I think the opposition between Democrat and Republican is in many ways a false dialectic. So I think it's not a real dichotomy. I think ultimately we're all Americans who are trying to do the best for our country. We want what's best for America. Obviously, many of the Democrats are very delusional, but so can many Republicans and conservatives too, where they think everything has to do with being mob-based or, I don't know, being right-wing or being edgy, and that's not particularly helpful either. That's not the answer, and that's not the solution. There's a lot of very delusional pro-Israel Republicans, and they're not helping either, right? And so I think the constant emphasis on fighting the Dems or those evil Republicans, those evil right-wing Nazis, right, is it's trying to pit the people of your society against each other. It's trying to fabricate a divide within your own country so that everybody's too busy attacking each other, focusing on each other, and not focusing on the enemy, right? So breaking up what otherwise might be a united front. And so the question really then is, how do we create a united front? Because there's a lot of centrists who want to say, well, I'm willing to put away some of my differences to unite with the right, or I want some of them to put away some of their differences and unite with me as a left-leaning or centrist person. Come together, right? The problem is that there's not going to be a meaningful set of principles or meaningful middle ground on which to meet, right? Because for the left and the right to cross, they have to meet up somewhere. Where are they going to meet up? Well, neither wants to give up their side, right? So the middle ground that both the left and the right need to come together to is the church. The church and its the principles, the moral principles, the universal principles of the church need to be what the left and the right unite around to come together and pursue meaningful change. Because the church is the only kind of institution that has enough compromise, has enough versatility within it to allow the left and the right to come together. Plus, it is the only institution that emphasizes and focuses on the things that are actually important, which are the moral and spiritual domain, right? This is going to be very hard for the left because the left has, for the longest time, obsessed about things that are directly antithetical to Christianity, like being pro-transgender, being pro-abortion. But there's nothing wrong with wanting to protect the victims or protect the innocent or protect against, I don't know, what they consider to be right-wing violence or whatever. There's nothing wrong with repurposing a leftist mindset or value set and converting it into something that can be useful. Something like charity work. If you really care about, the underclasses, the minorities, then that can be repurposed into something meaningful and productive, which is charity work for those people, for the poor, for the marginalized, for the oppressed, or whatever. Going and helping them, right? And the church has means to do that. If you want to be right wing and you want justice, the church has a system to define, and if there's enough people in the church who then become politicians, who become rulers of state, then they can use the defined justice from the church, instantiate that in the political realm. But it has to come from the church, right? There is no system of justice that's going to work, that's going to be universal and not be just arbitrary, that doesn't come from the church. You might not like Israel, for example, but do you actually have an argument for why we ought to oppose Israel or oppose foreign influence in a country? You might say sovereignty of nations, blah, 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 the government is by definition this, and that. But at the end of the day, a lot of these things are going to be preferential. They're going to be by definition, right? And they're not going to always be explicit enough to tell you exactly what the prescriptions are for that country, right? And it's not going to give you the moral oughts for why a country like Israel is problematic, right? It's not going to, if you don't understand the Bible's position, the church's position against a country today like Israel, you're not really going to understand why they're a problem, right? So someone like me, for example, I might be different because I don't dislike Jews simply because they're I don't know, they're weird looking, right? But that's very common, right? It's like a lot of people think Jews are weird or quirky, or they have some unique vices to their nature. But so does everyone. I mean, everyone has unique vices, so why ought we? Every race is going to have unique vices that are unique to them, right? So why pick on Jews in particular, right? So and so what if they're powerful? I mean, our group's not allowed to be, is being powerful in of itself a reason to have a problem, right? So these kinds of questions can only really be solidified, principled, and become principled within the church. And only once a large amount of individuals repent and come to the church and unite within the Orthodox Church can society actually begin to heal. Because what I see right now are a lot of Republicans, a lot of right-wing people who are disaffected and disillusioned with the system and the way it's going, and they're angry about things like Israel. They're angry about things like foreign control in the government. They're angry about the way maybe Trump's handling things, or maybe they're not. Maybe they like Trump and they're just mad at the Democrats. But it's not enough to simply be angry or disillusioned with the current system, because we need a solution, and we need an effective solution, something that's not going to be compromised, because the enemy we're up against is very powerful. They control the media, they control the banks, they control the food we eat, they control countries, they control foreign policy. So the Federal Reserve, right? Like, these people control vast amounts of power and a lot of soft power. And if we're not carefully, if we aren't principled and we aren't careful, then anything we aim to tear down might just get replaced by something that's once again subverted, or worse. It might get replaced by something worse. I think that's far more likely. I think that we're staring down the barrel of perhaps imminent societal, maybe just American, but maybe societal economic collapse. I think that's very probable. And what replaces that will not be good. The system that replaces like the American hegemonic liberal system, the thing that replaces that is not going to be good. It's going to be, there are a lot of elites with plans, with manifestos and documents and global strategies that are going to capitalize on the collapse of America. The economic pattern, the strategy of a lot of these Jews economically is to collapse systems and then profit off of the collapse, buy up the remains. We saw this in Russia after the Tsar fell. Buy up the remains for next to nothing and make a profit, right? So I think that a lot of the policy is actually aiming intentionally to undermine America, undermine Israel in its own state, and then eat it up, right? Eat up the discounted remains. Bit of an Ouroboros strategy going on there, but that's what we should expect. That's what we should look for, is when the system gets toppled or destroyed or severely crippled, what replaces it? And the thing that comes in to replace it is not going to be good. It's going to be more of this New World Order type technocracy, dystopia, transhumanist. It's going to be this kind of satanic nonsense, right? And we should kind of watch out for that. And so I think it's not just enough to be anti-system, anti-government. because we need an effective replacement or solution, something that isn't going to be broken so easily. And almost nobody seems to have really an answer for what that would be. And most answers are lazy. They're libertarian. They're anarchist. They're forced doctrine. And it's like, that's not how it's going to go. It's not going to return to a state of the wild, because, for one, you have massive companies that own drones and own tanks and military equipment to the tune of millions, right? So the idea that, well, society's just going to fall apart and it's going to be a bunch of men running around killing each other violently to establish power, that's not going to happen, right? Because what would happen if that was the scenario is you would have someone like Palantir, or you'd have some drone making facility run around, and if they could, they would just kill everybody, right? So it's tempting to think that a state of violence, a state of anarchy would be good for young men. That'd be an opportunity for them to be valuable again and tip the scales in their favor once we reintroduce the possibility of violence into the societal equation. But no, that's going to lead to more government crackdowns. That's going to lead to more top-down totalitarian systems. That's going to lead to more censorship and Skynet stuff, right? So it's not a good idea to. So that's generally why I'm against accelerationism. And all of that just to kind of prove the point that we need an effective solution. And the only kind of solution that we're going to have is one that comes from the church. Because the church is going to be the only effective unifying moral principle to actually generate something positive, right? It's very easy to identify something negative, but once you destroy the negative thing, what's going to replace it? And how do you know that? This is kind of my prediction, is that the Jews are actually going to use growing anti-Semitism to their favor, to use those people and their disillusionment to collapse the system. They're gonna use disenfranchisement, young male disenfranchisement. They're gonna use that to help them collapse the system faster, and then they're gonna scoop up the remains. So, which is very likely. I mean, I think Palantir is moving into position to do that. So, yeah. So I'd be worried, right? So I think the only real solution that's going to be effective against the enemy is going to be the church. It's going to be Christ. And that requires individuals to actually attend church, right? Go to church, take on these spiritual ascetic practices seriously. It's hard, man. It's hard, like, especially the fasting thing. I find that brutal. I failed many times, so I'm not perfect, but I understand that it's important. I can see that. I can see the value. That's like those are the moments where you're crushing evil, right? That's where you're putting this. Those are the moments where you're defeating evil, where you're putting it to shame, right? Where you're actually doing damage to the enemy. Think like the boss is a health bar. The only time you're actually doing damage to the boss's health bar is when you engage in these practices, right? So something to consider. I hope that happens. I don't know. I hope so. It seems like Orthodoxy is becoming very popular. I think as society deteriorates, it's going to help push people towards the Orthodox Church, which is good. I think what we're going to see is a polarization. I think we're going to see there's going to be people who are extremely degenerate and extremely chaotic and messed up and disenfranchised and kooky and lost. We're going to see people become more and more lost. And then there's going to be people in the Orthodox Church. And the Orthodox Church, especially in America, I think is going to grow. And there's problems even within the Orthodox Church. We're going to see tests and trials there. It's not going to be straightforward, but I think that's my prediction is we're going to see polarization. We're going to see the Western churches currently Protestant, Catholic become very messy, very problematic. People leaving those in droves, and we're going to see the secular culture just get even crazier, even worse. Might even start to see pedo shit become normalized. And then we're going to have the Orthodox Church, and that's going to be the bastion of traditionalism, meaningful, quote unquote, right wing-ism, right? And that's the only way we're going to be able to actually do anything, might be through that. So, something to consider. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with my thesis, if you think my thesis is sound, if I made any mistakes. But yeah, feel free to leave your comments down below. All right, take care.